Good afternoon, and thank you for joining this webinar about how to gain ground in your college recruiting process through showcases like Top 96. To take a look at our agenda this afternoon, we're gonna, after some quick introductions, we're gonna talk about how to use showcases in your recruiting as part of the process rather than as just this two-day standalone event. The split between regional versus national exposure and showcases. We'll talk about the role of data and analytics in recruiting from a coach standpoint and from a player and player development standpoint. And then we're going to take as much time as possible there at the end to get all your questions answered live from our team here. So to start with some introductions, my name is Max McKenna. I graduated from Amherst College in 2011. I myself was a Top 96 alum way back in 2006. Went on to play 4 years of college baseball at Amherst, had a career there as a pitcher. Went into teaching and coaching following my years at Amherst, first as a teaching fellow at Phillips Andover Academy, where I taught history and was assistant football and baseball coach, and then went on to a full-time teaching position at the Master's School, which is a private school outside New York City, where I was also a history instructor, head baseball coach there. Also have worked in the summer and really year-round, helping student athletes like those that are coming to Top 96 camps help leverage their opportunities in the recruiting process.
And my name is Kevin Keene. I graduated from NYU in 2017. I was originally recruited to go to Dickinson College to play baseball there prior to transferring to NYU. I studied sports management during my time there. And prior to joining Top 96, I was an intern with the Brooklyn Nets, focused on basketball operations and analytics.
Awesome. So the meat of why you guys are here. How do you use showcases in your recruiting process? So the way that we think about showcases like Top 96 is that they offer great top and mid-funnel exposure to college coaches to accomplish a handful of things. One is they offer a great opportunity to gain efficient exposure at targeting a larger swath and variety of regional or national college programs, so that you can be seen not just by a single coaching staff, but really by a variety and a volume of coaching staffs and coaches from the region that you're targeting or from the types of school that you're targeting, so that you can really increase your opportunities in the recruiting process rather than, you know, putting all your eggs in one basket and going to a school camp, which play an important role, and we can touch on that later on as well. But for that first round of exposure, second round of exposure, when you still have a larger list of schools that you're interested in, before you narrow that down, offers really efficient exposure to that volume of college programs.
Yeah, Max, and I think one of the keys here is, you know, you want showcases to have that core group of schools that you're interested in, but also have some that you haven't necessarily considered is that the right fit for you yet. As you said, that'll open up a lot of opportunities. Some of those schools will be similar to the ones you've considered. Some will be completely different. That's okay. This right now is about opening up those doors.
Absolutely, and this brings us to our second bullet point, which is using showcases like Top 96 to really be a platform for discovery of new schools. So if you show up at a Top 96 camp with a list of 5 of the 22 colleges that'll be there that are really high on your list, and then you meet a brand new college coach who, you know, at a school that you might not have considered or wasn't high on your list beforehand, you meet that coach, you have a great interaction, you get some good exposure, you continue the conversation. All of a sudden that school can move its way up your list. And so thinking about these not just as a way to target the schools that you already know about and already have high on your radar, but also those that are similar to those types of schools, whether it's the similar type of major, similar type of setting, similar type of region or academic experience, whatever the case may be, using this as a discovery platform to learn about even more opportunities than you previously had on your radar at great colleges and college programs. And then the last thing you see here is really good opportunity for a more holistic view in the recruiting process for student athletes beyond just gameplay. Tournaments, whether they're large national tournaments, smaller regional tournaments with travel ball clubs or high school teams or whatever the case may be, offer some really great baseball experiences, and some of my favorite memories in the world are at, you know, travel tournaments with my teammates. But what I think these things lack on the recruiting side is delivering this 360 view into you as a student athlete. showcases like Top 96 not only let coaches see you play games, which they certainly do, but also get your objective measurements, get some advanced data and analytics, get to meet you face to face and have direct conversations with you, get your academic information, see you in a situational practice, kind of see how you operate in practice. So getting to know you across all these different contexts lets them get more insight into who you are as a student athlete so that they can feel more comfortable as they progress down the recruiting journey with you.
Yeah, and I think something that, we'll see when we go into more specifics later, in addition to the different contexts, it's going to be a more intimate and a more personal setting. So it's not just sort of going through the motions. You're going to get to interact with those coaches as you're performing in those different capacities.
Absolutely. Now, we've mentioned a lot kind of efficient targeting of regional college programs, specifically at a camp like Top 96. So kind of what does this mean? What does this look like? When we think about this, when we build out this camp experience, it is about gaining really efficient exposure to 20 to 25 top regional college programs. We don't want you, mom and dad, or student athletes to waste time in the recruiting process. We're going to put 20 plus college coaches on one field for 2 days. All these schools are regional, and we'll touch on that point in a little bit, but really the key defining feature of showcases is this point, this mark about efficiency. Not just going to one school at a time and spending whole weeks or weekends or months even in the car or on buying plane tickets and in hotel rooms, but getting some mass volume and variety of exposure all at once to really deliver efficiency to your recruiting, as well as the results in your recruiting as well.
Yeah, and you'll see, even with some other showcases, you'll see that it'll be a little bit more spread out. They'll have the programming on different fields. The one field aspect is something that's really unique here, where it's simplified for the coaches. They know where everything's going to be. They just have to worry about interacting with the players, evaluating the players. So it's really a great opportunity there.
Next up is, okay, you're now convinced that you want to go to some kind of showcase because it delivers this efficiency, but how do you take this experience of a 2-day showcase or a 3-day showcase, whatever the case may be, a 1-day practice with a coach, and really leverage it beyond those 2 days? I think that a common mistake that I see from parents is trying to take this 2-day experience and view it as a standalone event, or they meet a coach on day 1 and they're committed by the end of day 2, or the opportunity is passed. And I think that's a misconception around showcases. And I think that what's really important is taking full advantage of a showcase involves a lot of coach communication before, during, and most importantly after camp, and also can be a great platform to continue to gain ground in your on-field development, your instruction as well. I mean, you have access to 20 top coaches in the country. It's a really good time to get some pointers in your game and really develop your game, in addition to access to some of the data and analytics that we'll talk about later on. For now, we're going to dig deep on some coach communication and how that can play a role at camp, after camp, before camp, to really help move your recruiting process forward. So coach communication, as I mentioned, we think about it in 3 phases. There's before camp, at camp, and after camp. Pretty simple, kind of separated by the timeline for which you're using. Now, this is specifically with reference to a discrete showcase experience. The principles of coach communication stay the same, but we're going to talk about how to leverage this before, during, and after, specifically a showcase. So before camp, a really key piece is doing your college research, Kevin.
Yeah, and so what you're going to want to do here is look at different aspects of the school that stand out to you and can make it a good fit. So you want to start wide here. You don't want to start with a narrow list. You want to keep your options open, but look for things like, what are you interested in studying? Is that an academic strength of the school? Do you want to go to a large school or somewhere a little bit smaller where you'll have an intimate setting with the faculty members? All of these things, you want to consider before getting to camp. So you also have some touch points in your initial outreach to coaches. Max, if you want to go to that second bullet there. First, here are some of the schools that will be attending camp. And you'll see that there's a variety here. So just because they're all from the same region, you're going to need to do your background research here to learn about these schools. They're going to have different geographies, different settings, and also different academic strengths. You also want to look at the role that the baseball program plays in the school. Some of them, that'll be the focus of the athletic department. Some of them will be schools that are maybe a little bit more focused on football. That should also weigh into your decision there. And then once you have this research done, you want to lay the groundwork by reaching out to these coaches. So some of those points that you looked up and that you saw, hey, this is why it might be a good fit for me, that will make your touch points to coaches stand out. It'll make it seem thoughtful. It'll make it a little bit more personalized. Something to keep in mind is, we're in the middle of the recruiting process during the summer. Coaches might not get back to you right away. That doesn't mean that your email went unnoticed. Chances are they saw it. They just don't necessarily have the time to get back to you right away. Don't be discouraged by that. Stay in touch with them.
Absolutely. I think that keyword there is really the proactivity, right? Reaching out before camp, setting your list after you've done your college research so that you know which of these schools are the ones that you want to reach out to, and then laying the groundwork with that coaching staff can really set you up to hit the ground running that day one of camp and say, hey, coach, great to meet you. I sent you an email, and he says, I remember the email. Thank you for sending it along. The next piece is building a centralized recruiting hub, as we're calling it. And what you see here is a screenshot with the name redacted from NCSA, which is the idea behind this is that you don't want to send in this proactive and preemptive communication with college coaches. You don't want to necessarily send them 7 different emails updating your SAT scores or updating your transcript or sending them a new recruiting video. So having one place that you can use as a landing page or a touch point, a centralized touch point for your recruiting process is really important to be able to help you communicate with college coaches and send them to a single place and say, hey coach, I have updated video, here's a link, instead of, hey coach, I have an updated video, here's an attachment that you need to download off this email, or whatever the case may be. It makes it easier and more efficient.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. I mean, there are so many barriers in the recruiting process that can make things a little bit tougher. You want to try and break those down. So having something like this that coaches can reference and go back to without needing to hear from you, that can really help you out later down the road.
Yeah, and I think that coaches are so busy and are fielding so many emails from and other forms of communication from prospective student athletes that they need efficiency in this as well, just as you do as a student athlete or as a parent looking through your recruiting or your players recruiting. And so having everything centralized really helps them do their job more efficiently, which ultimately, the easier you can make their job, their recruiting job, the more it's going to pay off for you because it's easier for them to recruit you. At camp is another really key phase in this, and obviously this is something that we feel strongly about, specifically about showcases as opposed to something like tournaments.
Yeah, and so you will have plenty of opportunities at camp to approach these coaches, have a conversation with them. Don't feel like you need to rush it. If you have a conversation with a coach, use that time to maybe pose some questions to them if some things come up that you haven't done the research on. If you want to revisit that conversation later, you'll have some time to take out your phone, look up some facts about the school, also 2-day event after day 1, maybe do a little bit of research before coming back for day 2, and then reapproach that conversation with them. The coaches will really appreciate, A, that you're following up, but B, that you're doing it in a really thoughtful way.
Yeah, and I think that this also ties back to this idea of using a showcase with a variety and volume of coaches as a discovery platform too. If again, you come into camp with a list of 5 schools that are high on your list, you have a great interaction with a coach, pull out your phone right there, do a little research on that school so that you can have a more informed conversation with that coach later on to help yourself follow up. And you had this great interaction with a coach, learn about if this school is a fit, and start to really suss that out by doing that in the moment research in addition to the prep work that you've already done too.
Yeah, and we talked about coaches are so busy in the recruiting process. They know that you are too as a student athlete. Don't feel like you need to kind of fake your way through the conversation. Coaches will be able to tell. Just be honest with them, and again, ask questions if you feel like you need more information in the conversation. Yeah, and again, this point here, engage. The guaranteed exposure to schools is a great part of showcases, but you need to take advantage of all aspects of it. So coaches are there to meet you. They want to hear from you. If you feel nervous going into a conversation, you know that you guys have baseball in common. Start there. Ask them questions about their program. They've been through this a lot. They know that student athletes can maybe be a little bit nervous. Don't let that hold you back. Again, stick to baseball stuff if that helps, but also look for the coaching aspect of it. Feel free to ask for feedback and pointers. They'll really like that you have that attitude that you want to improve and that you're showing that you're coachable.
Absolutely. And I think that the bullet points here as well, I think, Kevin, speaking to that feedback and be coachable, but also this idea of proactivity keeps on coming up as well. And I think that this is something that I see a lot of student athletes make as a mistake in the recruiting process, is assuming that college coaches know that players are interested in their program, right? Coach DeCenzo from Holy Cross, or knows that Max is interested in this school. That's not always the case. And so this idea of being proactive is the idea that you need to recruit, quote unquote, recruit these schools just as much, if not more, than the schools are recruiting you as well. You need to demonstrate that interest. They want to recruit student athletes that are interested in their program, and being interested in their program is a good way to get and stay on their radar and really advance your process. And being proactive is a really key way to deliver that as well. And then this other thing, starting with baseball is a really good foundational step for student athletes that are at all, hesitating about how intimidating it can be to talk to a college coach. The other thing is build and have a plan or a script for some of these conversations as well. You're gonna know, because you've done your research, obviously, a few key things about a school. So when you go up to a coach and you wanna have that conversation, you cannot just say, hey coach, it's really nice to meet you, but hey coach, it's really nice to meet you. I am interested in X school for Y reason. And being able to have a couple of those talking points can again, indicate that clear interest in the school, but also make a student athlete more comfortable, because they have, for the first 10 or 15 seconds of a conversation, they're not thinking on their feet, they're not reacting, they're laying out the script that they've developed that will set them up for success and really be a good entry point into a continued conversation.
Yeah, and Max, talking about assumptions that players make, another one is that if you're good, they'll find you. At a showcase like this, with everything on one field, the odds are a little bit better, obviously, but you're going to find that a lot of players at camp are really strong players. At the next level, everybody was the best player on their high school team. Being willing to engage and having those talking points ready to go is going to help you stand out a lot more, so that when you perform on the field, coaches aren't just noticing you for that. They're going to remember the conversation you had previously.
For sure. And another piece that I almost forgot to mention is we mentioned that coaches want to get a holistic 360-degree view into you as a student athlete. Engaging with them is a really important piece of this. Coaches need to recruit on-field talent, certainly. They want kids that can throw and hit the ball hard and run fast, but they also want kids that are the right fit for their program, the right program, or the right fit for the program that they have now and that they're trying to build into on the field and off the field, the right fit for campus, the right character and leadership qualities for the team that they're building. Engaging with them and being proactive gives them a sense of who you are, and also can really denote some of this character by signaling this maturity of having the confidence and everything to walk up to a college coach and introduce yourself as well. Once you go to camp and you've had great conversations, your job is not done on the coach communication side. In fact, it's really just beginning. Laying the groundwork beforehand, you want to be in touch with coaches. At camp, you want to talk to them face to face, have them put a name to a face, sense your maturity, get a sense of your confidence, who you are on and off the field. A lot of the work of a showcase in terms of delivering the results comes from the follow-up after camp as well. And you want to follow up proactively with your target schools. You don't want to go to a showcase and then wait to hear from the schools that were there. That goes back to Kevin's point about this idea that, if I'm good, they'll find me. There will be schools that reach out to you, and we'll talk about that in bullet point 2. But for the schools that you are highly interested in, do not wait for them to reach out to you. Reach out to them proactively. And also, you want to mix up your platforms, right? Email is easy, it's free, it's what everybody's on, and so the bulk of your coach communication is going to be over email, but also mix it up. If you're really interested in Cal State San Marcos, give them a follow on Twitter, give them a follow on Instagram, comment on their story, shoot the coach a text if you're on a texting basis with him, write them a handwritten letter is something that I advise a lot of student athletes as well. It used to be that mailboxes were super crowded, now email inboxes are crowded, and so you can stand out to college coaches and also really signify the interest you have by taking the time, care, and attention to put a handwritten, put pen to paper and put something in a coach's mailbox. And then, as I mentioned, you want to recruit your target programs as much as they're recruiting you. Don't wait for them. Be proactive and reach out to them and signify your interest to college coaches.
Yeah, Max, I think focusing on that second point there, responding to every coach that reaches out, it's kind of easy to get stuck in a trap of, you think you know exactly what you're looking for in a school, and another school comes along that you haven't considered and kind of, maybe putting it off till later. It's exciting to hear from the school that they're interested in you, even if it's one that you haven't thought about. Channel that excitement. So make that follow up a little bit more personal. Even consider the handwritten note there. Keeping that door open will really help. The coaches will appreciate it. Coaches certainly talk, so it'll help kind of build up that character that they're looking for in you.
Absolutely, and this bullet point number 2 is something that I think escapes notice for a lot of student athletes and a lot of families, because they want to be in touch with the schools that they have on their list. But to Kevin's point, coaches talk to each other. This signifies a certain amount of maturity, and also you don't know necessarily what school might end up being the right fit for you. It's really important to keep an open mind throughout this process to find not only the schools you already know about and already love, but also some of those that you might not know about yet, or aren't high on your list yet, until you learn something unique or special about that coaching staff, that program, that school, that really piques your interest. So by responding to every coach thoughtfully, completely, respectfully, doing your research beforehand, really keeps your opportunities open, so that when it comes down to it, if you say, I really wish I hadn't shut the door at Caltech, because it turns out now that I know that that would be a perfect fit for me as a student athlete.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about the coaching staff there, I remember from my own experience getting some follow-ups after a showcase, and I didn't necessarily handle it as appreciative as I should have. The next showcase I went to, the coaches were at a different school, and so if you really connect with a coach, there's a chance they might end up at a program later that is a better fit for you. So you want to maintain that relationship and just stay in touch with them.
Absolutely. And then also leveraging the communication you have with coaches at camp and before camp to help formulate your next action plan, right? You need to walk at a camp and take a moment and appreciate and savor the moment. And it was so good to be here and meet all these coaches, but also, what am I going to be doing next? What am I doing in the next week, next month, next 3 months to continue the momentum from this 2-day experience and carry it through to really deliver results in my recruiting process? And for me, this falls into a couple of different buckets. Some examples you see here. Schools that you're highly interested in and that have demonstrated interest. You might want to go visit campus officially and spend a night with somebody on the team, or do an unofficial campus visit if you are on the younger end of the spectrum, but to get a sense of these campuses and how the school might fit, and then also start to assess school-specific camps. We mentioned earlier that school-specific camps play a really important role in the recruiting process as you start to narrow down your list. One action plan when you walk away from a showcase like Top 96 would be to say, okay, I really connected with Cal State San Bernardino. I'm going to find out when their camp is, I'm going to sign up, and I'm going to do an unofficial visit, and kind of setting this action plan for the schools that you walk away with.
Yeah, Max, and I think some of the points you just talked about kind of brings up the idea. We need to differentiate between being proactive and being rushed in your process. You want to kind of stay on top of the ball, but like you just mentioned, you can take steps that are moving at your own pace. So taking that unofficial visit, that allows you to learn more about the school without committing. I mean, it just really helps that if you're taking the steps to be proactive in your process, you'll eventually get to a place where you're comfortable.
Absolutely. And I'm a personal huge proponent of taking campus visits before you commit anywhere. I think that the character of a campus and who you meet on campus and a sense of the place is going to be really important to finding the right school fit. And so I always advise that any schools that are high on your list or that you're considering, before you apply to them, before you commit to them, make sure you do a campus visit, whether it's official or unofficial, just to get a sense of that place and if it's the right fit for you.
Absolutely.
Now we're going to talk about the idea of kind of regional showcases versus these national showcases and what the difference is, and also why Top 96 is focused the way that we are on regional. And for us, what does regional mean for Top 96? For us, a lot of this has to do with the coach lists. You see here 2 example coach lists for our Los Angeles camp coming up next weekend and our Atlanta camp coming up in late June. When we think about region, we believe there needs to be efficiency here, and it is really important that you are gaining exposure to schools in the area that you are focused. For a lot of kids, and we'll talk about this on the next couple slides, this means a school that is close to home. It also might mean that if I'm coming from Massachusetts, but I have my heart set on being in Atlanta for 4 years, it can mean targeting Atlanta as a city, either as a resident of that region or as somebody coming in from the outside who really likes the feel of that city and I want to spend 4 years there. So for us, it's about focus on the school list so that we can help deliver as many opportunities as possible in the region that you're looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, just from looking at these lists, same region, absolutely. Carbon copies of each other, by no means. You're going to find a lot of differences in these schools. So just make sure to do your research, find out a little bit more about, the size, how the curriculum is set up, what their academic strengths are. It's great to have sort of that regional focus, but also have an idea of what else you're looking for in the process.
Absolutely. Now, we've decided regional, we've said that 2025 in-region coaches is an important discipline to hold ourselves to. Why is this? Why do we focus on regional? And for us, it comes down to a handful of things, but it starts with really kind of statistics about college. 86% of college attendees go to school within 500 miles of home. That's a really high majority of kids that are going to school pretty close to home. This is, for example, a 500-mile radius around Atlanta. Yes, it covers a large swath of the Southeast and parts of the Mid-Atlantic, but when you consider that 86% of kids from Atlanta are going to school in this circle, that's a really high volume of kids who are going to school in a fairly tight geographical region. You zoom in one more layer, 51% of college attendees, more than half of kids, go to school within 100 miles of home. You draw that same 100-mile circle around Atlanta, and really that is a pretty tight focus on the region. So we believe that city and setting not only have been demonstrated as something that is important in the recruiting process, but also are a really key way to find the right fit in college. And there's something, narrowing in on region and narrowing in on city or state is something that you also can oftentimes do before you know where you fall athletically or academically. You don't know if you're going to be a Division 1, 2, or 3 type player. You don't know what your SAT or ACT scores are, where they'll fall, but you might know that, look, I'm going to be going to school. There's more than a coin flip chance I'm going to school within 100 miles of home, just statistically.
Yeah, and by no means are these statistics limited to the markets where top 96 is. Going to NYU, a school with a global focus. Most of my friends from there are from Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. So this will follow you around the country, no doubt.
And then there's this idea of the other focus on being regional for top 96 is the data and analytics in recruiting as well. And so we're going to kind of dive in on that. So when we think about data and analytics, first I want to talk about the role that data and analytics play in college recruiting, because I think that they're fairly new to the space. And so we kind of want to talk about how college coaches are using them and also how student athletes are using these new, really quite advanced tools to advance their recruiting, and then a bit more about the specifics of Top 96 when it comes to the data that we use at camp to help deliver the best opportunity to student athletes. So how do college coaches use data and analytics? A first really important piece is in benchmarking against their current players. More and more of these schools are using, if not exactly Soto, which is what we use at camp, they're using some tool like Soto, TrackMan, HitTracks, Blast Motion, whatever the case is. And so they have really important and really in-depth analytics on their pitchers, on their hitters, on their players that they can use to then backtrack. I was having a conversation with the Duke coaching staff, and one thing that they are highly focused on is they are taking their top performers and the players on their roster, and they are using that data to build a regression back to say, okay, our top pitcher has a spin rate of X, a velocity of Y, a release angle of Z. What did that look like in high school so that we can find the next kid who has this type of ceiling and this type of potential on the mound for us so that they can continue to recruit the types of players that can bring them success on the field.
Yeah, and I think something like that, looking at progression, really emphasizes some of those intangibles that we talked about. If they have the data on you where they see you can project to be a good player, and they see that you're willing to be coachable, willing to put in that hard work, that makes it even easier for them to imagine how you can impact their program.
Absolutely, which brings us right into the next point, kind of gauging the projectability for high school recruits. As a high school senior, I was 5'7", weighed $130 soaking wet. If you had looked at me, you might have said, wow, that's probably not a college pitcher. That kid's pretty small. But in an age of analytics, you can take that kid who might not fit the eye test, or there's something special that stands out, but you can't quite put a finger on it, and you can really put some data behind that to say, oh, that kid is projectable because of X, Y, or Z. You look at that kid who's a little undersized and you say, you know what, he has a live arm, which means high spin rate, or means he can be effective with a low spin rate, or whatever the case may be. And this idea of projectability is crucial to the recruiting process. This is really the main thing that college coaches are assessing. Yes, they're looking at you as a player as you stand right now, but they are doing so in order to build out a model of what you look like in 3, 4, 5 years once you are in their program. They care about who you are right now as a player and as a person. They care much more about where they think you can be when you're a high school or a college senior in their program, contributing to their program. That is why they're looking at you now. And so delivering this data to them helps them build a more full picture of how that timeline progresses and how your development might follow. Next up, and again, this comes down to in-depth assessment. Certain coaches are going to look at different things. One coach is going to look at the broad jump to measure your athleticism. One coach is going to look at the vertical leap to measure your athleticism. One person assessing pitchers is going to look at spin rate. Another is going to look at true spin rate or spin efficiency. They all kind of pick on their own pet metrics to indicate what they think can point to success in the long term and in their programs. So giving them all of this allows them to make their own in-depth assessments as well.
Yeah. I think something else really cool that it does, and believe me, I wish this was something when I was going through the showcase process, it doesn't put quite as much pressure on your in-game performance during the showcase. You know, if you're the kind of player who's going to show up to camp and put 3 balls in the gap, that will still matter a lot. Don't get me wrong. But they'll also have this full profile of you. So if you don't necessarily have the best game in the world, you still have this full body of work at the showcase. You have those chances to interact with them. So they're going to have a lot more to take away with them and to evaluate you after camp.
Absolutely. And this again speaks to that kind of 360-degree holistic view that coaches want into you. It applies to your off the field character and personality, your on field play. And this is another way to give them even more depth into your tools, right? It's not just, oh, he hits the ball hard. It's he hits the ball how hard, or that launch angle looks good, or this kid looks like he can hit a lot of home runs or a lot of doubles, whatever the case is, and say, oh, that's because of launch angle X degrees that is able to deliver on that.
Yep. And talking about benchmarking against their current players, it also gives you a benchmark against yourself. So if you have the opportunity later on to update these metrics and send them to coaches, they'll be able to see that you put in the hard work and that you improved.
And that brings us cleanly into our last point here, which is player development. These college coaches are using this data to really roadmap their players' development in their program. They are looking at pitchers on Soto, and they are saying, your spin rate is X, your velocity is Y. How do we take these things and make you a more effective pitcher on the mound? Are you a sinker slider guy, or are you a fastball curveball guy? What are the pitches you can be most effective with? And there's some really cool stuff out there now, specifically with Soto, Driveline, and Trevor Bauer of the Indians, using this in pitch development specifically. But the same thing applies to player development across the board for hitters and for pitchers certainly too. And coaches are using this in their programs to help their players get better. It's painting a more complete picture. They're able to point to specific things about this data to say, if we work on this piece of data, we will improve your performance. And the same thing can apply to student athletes in the high school ranks who are looking to continue their development on the field. As Kevin mentioned, using the data from camp as a benchmark for yourself and a baseline for yourself can help paint a picture for you of how you can continue to develop your game so that you can project even more highly at the college level too. So one thing that we do at camp to deliver on these data and metrics is our Top 96 Athletic Index. This is a battery of assessments that we give to all players and then pass these numbers along to college coaches. The idea behind this is coaches want to recruit. A common misconception is that coaches are recruiting positions. They're recruiting outfielders, they're recruiting first basemen, they're recruiting shortstops, whatever. More often than not, coaches are recruiting athletes. And so they want somebody who can run and field and hit the ball hard and throw the ball well, and then they can find a place for them, whether that's at shortstop and they're a high school shortstop, or whether they're taking a high school shortstop and moving them to the corner outfield because they're foot speed doesn't line up with where they see their shortstops in their program. They're looking for the best athletes and helping find a place for them on the field in their program. What the athletic index does is put some numbers behind this athleticism and saying not just, oh, like that kid passes the eye test and he looks like he moves quick and looks like his 60 time would translate into in-game, but no, what is his athletic potential in terms of lower half power? Great. Well, let's get a broad jump. Let's get a vertical leap. How quickly does this kid change direction? He looks like he can make some moves in the field and adjust quickly. Great. What is his pro agility shuttle time, to put some numbers to that so that coaches really can spot check themselves, but also be more confident in their own assessments and their own notes.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about keeping those options open when looking at schools. Having something like this keeps options open by demonstrating versatility. If you are able to perform on these metrics and coaches can imagine how you can fit into different positions, that's going to make it a lot easier for them to imagine you being part of their program.
Absolutely. Then there's this kind of more new agey, technology-driven idea of Soto, and we've mentioned this name a lot, and it's an important camp partner that we have to deliver this level of data and analytical insight to college coaches. And so Soto is a system and a platform for taking advanced data and analytics, specifically for pitching and for hitting. So it gives in-depth data and metrics for pitchers and hitters to give recruiters and college coaches insight into not just, oh, it looks like he hits the ball hard, but what are your tools? What are the measurables behind your tools? What are the data points behind that? And so when we look at here, and you see here a screenshot of Soto pitching, it delivers all of this data and actually much more. This is just a partial list of what it delivers. Obviously velocity, which you can get with a radar gun, but in addition, spin rate, spin access, spin efficiency. It models every pitch. You see there in the bottom right of that picture, it shows what the pitch looks like in 3 dimensions, and you can turn and rotate that, or you look at this pitch as opposed to the next pitch, and it offers this tunneling so that coaches can look at how your curveball looks against your fastball, or how this fastball looked against this other fastball, or your changeup, so you're making sure you're not tipping your pitches. And it gives all of this type of information, as well as things like release height, release angle, and release extension, which as coaches and as this data learns more and more about pitching performance, the release angle, height, extension is so key to actually being effective, and until now has kind of been undersold or under-recognized because it is harder to track for some of these as well. And then on the hitting side, exit velocity is one that is fairly easy to measure. How hard you hit the ball, sure, but also what's the spin rate? What does that ball look like in flight? What's the launch angle and direction? And when you put all these together, you start to get a picture of not just how hard does this kid hit the ball, but what would his slugging percentage look like in my program? And coaches can start to build a model for what that looks like by combining things like exit velocity, launch angle, this 3D ball flight modeling, and it really gives some really pure insight into your tools and projected performance as well.
Yeah, and again, I think we can see from here, but just such a more complete picture than a handful of at-bats. Really easy for coaches to see what you can do with a little bit of coaching, a little bit of development, and take your game to the next level.
And now I want to take really as much time as we need to go through some of the live Q&A. So first, to send a question, which I haven't let you guys know yet. To send a question, you'll find a questions toolbar up in the top of your GoToWebinar toolbar. Just type that question, click that question button, type in your question, send it over to us, and we're going to compile them and answer them. If you do not get a chance to ask your question now or have it answered, if you have to run, you have to jump off the webinar, there's plenty of time left to get your questions answered. Send us an email. You see our email, phone number, and some of our web pages that can have some more information below on the screen right there. Reach out to us. We are always happy to answer any of your questions. We also do have a live chat feature on our website. You head to top96.com and you have a question that comes up. Click that little button in the bottom right hand of the corner of the screen, and then you can get your question answered right then from one of our team members. So I guess we'll dive on into the first question. Kevin, what are we getting?
Yeah, great, Max. And I think kind of a natural starting point from those last few slides. How can players use that Soto data after camp?
Great question, because we talked about how coaches use it after camp, but how can I as a player use it? And one thing is through our, just very concretely and tactically, through our partnership with Soto, every player that comes to camp is going to get a 30-day free membership to the Soto cloud so that they can access this data. They can download this data, they can bring it to their pitching instructor, hitting instructor, and use it to help themselves get better. Also, what we will provide is a cheat sheet, so to speak, for what these metrics mean, right? Because all these numbers in a vacuum don't necessarily help you get better as a student athlete. These numbers all mean something to college coaches because they're using these types of platforms. But for the average high school, player, high school baseball player, or for the average parent, a lot of these are going to look like hieroglyphs, right? You're like, spin efficiency, what is that? Let alone how do I use it to get better at baseball? So we're going to provide a cheat sheet that tells you what these things are, and also some indications of kind of where you might sit with reference to other players your age, and also how to use them. So it's not that high spin rate is good, low spin rate is bad, or low spin rate is good and high spin rate is bad. There aren't really any of these metrics that say this is good and this is bad. It's just how you use it. And so having this unique picture of yourself as a player, as a pitcher, as a hitter, lets you more fully settle on what your game is. If you're a kid with a high spin rate, you're going to learn that you can be more effective high in the zone. If you have a low spin rate, you are going to be more effective low in the zone. So using this to get tips like that to be more effective and continue to design your game around your unique strengths. Is one way that I would encourage student athletes to use it. The other thing, though, is you can get some pictures of where you might need to improve as well. If you look at your athletic index and you say, well, my broad jump isn't quite where I want it to be, great. That is something that you can go out and work on. You can get on a deadlift and a squat program and really improve there to demonstrate your athleticism. So using all of these data points to uniquely tailor your game to the strengths that you have as a player, and also shore up and address some of those weaknesses as well.
Great. Another question, I'll keep this one, is that we mentioned that you'll have the opportunity to showcase in different contexts at camp. So what are a couple of those? So we talked about the offensive and defensive showcase in the morning of day one at camp, where a lot of those metrics will be taken. There's also more intimate opportunities with the coaches. So there's going to be a situational practice, and there will also be position-specific practices. So with the position-specific ones in particular, going to be some smaller groups, and the coaches will be on the field with you. So a lot of opportunities to get reps in with them, to get feedback from them, and then with the situational practice, go through some different game scenarios with them. So you really have a chance to kind of show off your footwork and your mechanics, but also show off your baseball IQ. In addition to those opportunities, there's also going to be a dedicated college coach meet and greet. So not necessarily an athletic situation there, but you will have the opportunity to talk with them in smaller groups, introduce yourself, find out more about their schools. So really promoting that engagement with college coaches there. And then of course, you're going to have the live game opportunity. All the coaches will be on one field watching you. Some of them will be in the dugout with you. So again, another opportunity to get some feedback, but also just get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that to touch on that point about kind of the meet and greet and some of these opportunities for very organic engagement, both on day one and also certainly on the field during day two, as we talked about a little bit as well. I think that if you come into a Top 96 event thinking about this as purely a baseball experience or purely an on-field experience, and then stuff outside the lines you leave to chance or don't prepare as much for, or don't have kind of the same rigorous prep for, I think that you're really selling yourself short. I think that preparing for that college coach meet and greet by knowing some of the things about these schools, doing your research, having a list of unique facts about the schools or things that you find interesting about them is just as important as a really quote unquote showcase of your personality and character as your on-field performances over the 2 days as well.
Great. Another question we get a lot is there any video at our camp?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think video, similar to data and metrics, is playing more and more of a role in college recruiting. And we partner with a company called Skillshow, and they film all of the showcase portion. The defensive showcase, the pitcher showcase, which is where you'll be doing the Soto metrics as well, and the hitting showcase. And then you have the availability if you'd like to purchase this from them. There are some times when a little bit more polish, a little bit more dedicated interest in this video component, rather than just necessarily having it be something that mom or dad film with an iPhone, can really help deliver results, and signify, again, to coaches your interest and your seriousness in the recruiting process. And it's a really important piece. I mean, coaches can only get out and watch so many showcases and so many tournaments. And when we have coaches at camp, we'll have 25 programs there. We will have a coach from each of those programs who is, well equipped to make recruiting decisions and move the recruiting process forward. But also, they're going to want to cross-check. A lot of these programs function as kind of like regional cross-checkers, where one coach will see Kevin Keene play and get a sense of him and say, you know what, I really liked him. And then another coach will be able to get out and see Kevin at a different facility, a different tournament, a different showcase, whatever the case may be, to verify that coach's interest. By doing some of this with video, you can help them accelerate this timeline by showing them the entire coaching staff, here is who I am as a player with whatever, this game footage, this showcase footage from Top 96. They get a sense of who you are, and they don't, they can make that decision a little bit quicker as a coaching staff.
Absolutely. A little bit more of a unique question that we got. Person says that our student athlete loves the types of schools on the list. They're not sure how they feel about being really close to home. It's not a positive, it's not a negative, kind of unsure. For me personally, this was a deciding factor in my college decision, and it originally went the other way. NYU was not on my list right away because I didn't think I wanted to go to a school that was super close to home. After visiting campus, I realized that it's totally possible to feel far away from home while still being close to home, and then you get both benefits there. So your college experience will be a lot of what you make of it. If you want to be very involved in campus life and kind of stay on campus all the time, you can absolutely do that. The schools that are close by and in the same region, they're all going to have different settings, different features about the schools that are unique and stand out. So region should play an important factor in your decision. But I would say visit the campuses, learn more about the schools before making a decision one way or the other. You're going to find that it's just one factor that goes into it, and that there will be other things about the school that will really stand out and can make you feel almost at home away from home.
Excellent. I think that wraps up the questions that we've gotten and that we'd like to answer. Again, not the last opportunity to get your questions answered. If anything comes up, feel free to ping us on our website, over email, give us a call, anything as the case may be. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn a bit more about how to leverage showcase experiences in your recruiting process and a bit more about Top 96. Thank you, and we hope to see you at a camp this summer.